Watashi no namae wa Man desu. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Etiquette. Maybe you haven't thought much about it, but this is how we communicate respect and concern for people and events in our lives. Show up at a funeral wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and you're communicating something about your respect for the deceased, his family, and the ritual itself. And you're also saying a lot about yourself as well. Different cultures have different rules of etiquette. Failing to learn these rules or ignoring them is guaranteed to have a negative effect on your relationships with other people. Practicing good etiquette is not only good for you, it's a way of being kind to others. In a Japanese dojo, there are lots of rules of etiquette, and many are new, different, and strange to people from other cultures. But learning and following these rules is not only a way of communicating respect for others, but will earn you respect as well. And that goes a long way toward building friendships and community. You can travel to dojo all around the world, and even if you and the people there speak different languages, the common Japanese etiquette will immediately bring you together. Within the world of martial arts, there is considerable difference in the rules of etiquette. This is also true within karate dojo specifically. There's no official standard over there in Japan. There's considerable diversity. Even within an organization, the practice can vary from dojo to dojo. This video is going to focus on dojo etiquette in the iogkf-usa. A lot of this applies to all martial arts, but the focus here is on how etiquette is practiced in this organization. To begin with, there are certain basic things that you really should know and do. Bow when you enter the dojo. Line up in the correct spot. Refer to the people with the correct title, if they have one. Most of the time, your instructor will be sensei, but often that title is reserved until the instructor is sandan, or third-degree black belt. Also, wear your uniform correctly, left over right. And there are certain basic things you should not do in a Japanese dojo. Don't walk across the parking lot in your bare feet and then enter the dojo. And don't sit on your butt with your legs splayed out when the instructor is teaching. Don't be the last person to get to your place in line when the instructor calls shugo. Don't come to class with dirty fingernails. All 20 of your nails should be cleaned and trimmed. No one wants an infection because of your lack of hygiene. And don't tie your belt so the end goes up and down. I hate that. It should look like this. After the basics, there are more things that you learn. Bow a little lower and a little longer to your seniors, but don't bow super low. Doing so can be obsequious. You can look up obsequious later. Other rules. Let your seniors go through the door first, even if you get there at the same time. Be modest in front of older people, even if you outrank them. If your technique is corrected, don't make excuses or provide explanations. Just politely acknowledge that you understand. Simply saying height is good enough. When it comes to sitting, seiza is the most formal position. This is hard for many Westerners to do for very long, and so transitioning discreetly to agura, cross-legged, Indian-style, Burmese position, or whatever you want to call it, this is fine. Japanese culture also permits women to sit like this. And children can sit this way, if the instructor says it's okay in your dojo. It's okay in some and not in others. Do not just stroll into class if you get there late. Sit in seiza just inside the entrance. I've seen some instructors get really mad when people don't do that and just walk in. And none of us like to be yelled at in front of everybody else. Along those lines, if you would like to leave class, you should ask permission. But make sure it's a good reason, not because you want a sip of water or to check your InstaSnap account. I heard about a black belt test in Okinawa where some students performed their kata and then had a little rest time as another group went up. And so some of them got up and went out to get a drink of water. And that was the end of their test. You may have noticed that some karate schools use the response of us a lot. In Japan, there are us dojo and height dojo. The IOGKF uses height, not us. This is more common among Okinawan karate schools. In the IOGKF, we also use very few titles. 99% of the time, you won't come across anything other than sensei. That is a much more Japanese approach. In martial arts, there are some other honorifics, like shihan or kancho, but we don't use them as titles. Also, despite what you see on the internet, the Japanese don't use honorifics like kyoshi, renshi, and hanshi as titles. Having that honorific is like having MBA or CPA after your name if you earn that distinction. It can appear in writing, but no one actually calls you that. Also, one does not use titles with reference to oneself. In Japan, no one would ever introduce him or herself saying, "Hello, I'm Sensei Tanaka." That's really pretentious. Here in the US, however, some instructors will do that to a limited degree so that students new to the context of the dojo understand the proper way to address the teacher. Japanese society is very hierarchical, and part of this is the senpai-kohai relationship. Those who are your seniors are your senpai, and your juniors are your kohai. Senpai are given a certain amount of respect and deference. This should, ideally, come with added responsibility on the part of the senpai. Please note, senpai is not a title like sensei is. If I were a green belt talking with other green belts, and I was wondering where Sally the brown belt is, I might say, "Has anyone seen Senpai Sally?" But her seniors would not call her senpai. It's a relative term. One final word on titles. In Japan, the family name comes first, and then the title, like Batty Sensei. In America, we use first names more and put the title first, like Sensei Ralph. In the iogkf-usa, you'll find people using both methods, or a combination, like Sensei Batty. Variations are fine. You may want to stick to the practice of your own instructors, or err on the side of being more formal. But it's okay that people do things a little bit differently. But if you're going to Japan or visiting Nakamura Dojo, definitely use the surname. And then there are the super advanced etiquette rules that not even all Japanese know, like which foot you should enter the dojo with first. One of the challenges of teaching Japanese culture in a non-Japanese context is that certain rules that are common knowledge in Japan are not in other places. More needs to be explained. However, one of the social norms is that the head instructor should not be explaining rules of etiquette. In Japan, everyone already knows them. But abroad, where they don't, and when the instructor is reticent to do so, sometimes the rules don't get learned. So it's the job of the seniors to explain the rules to the juniors. Senpai instruct kohai. Just make sure you're doing it in a polite, helpful way and not being bossy or condescending. Now, if you want to be respectful, be appreciated as a student, earn the confidence of instructors and fellow students, and not be ignored, learn the etiquette. To do this, remember 3 things. Number 1, ask. Maybe some of the rules are written down somewhere. Find out. At the appropriate time, ask questions. Am I sitting in seiza correctly? What title should I use for that person? Please let me know if I'm ever doing something wrong. Number 2, watch. Trying to imitate what you see others doing will get you pretty far. Of course, when you're just starting out, you don't even know what to look for. And if you're coming in from another dojo, you may just rely on habit. But when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So watch. Years ago, I was in Kozenji Zen Temple in Okinawa and was invited to stay for a meal. And while my Japanese etiquette was pretty good for a gaijin, there were so many subtle and specific rules in play that following them all would have been an impossibility for me. However, the senior man there that day noticed that I was watching everyone else with great intensity, trying to imitate them and follow their example. And at one point he looked over at me as I was moving my tray to be in alignment with everyone else's, and he simply smiled and gave me the thumbs up. Watch and imitate. That brings us to number 3, the most important rule of etiquette. Deru kugi wa utareru. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Now, there's no way you're going to get everything right, especially when visiting new places with different rules. However, following this principle is the most important one, and it covers a multitude of sins. Don't stick out. We Americans love our individuality and uniqueness. We're all special in our own way. But in Japan, standing out from the crowd is not a virtue. It means, like a nail poking its head up, you get hammered down. Now, most of the time, this means you get ignored. Sometimes, if you're obnoxious enough, it means you can literally get beat down, and that's not a good place to be. So, if you find you're the only one yelling, "Us," stop it. You're being rude. If you're yelling out the name of the kata 3 times as loud as everyone else, stop. You're being obnoxious. If you're the only student wearing a bandana in class, you might want to rethink that choice, or at least speak to the instructor. Maybe it's fine, maybe it's not, but stop doing things that draw attention to yourself. "Look at me!" was never said by a polite Japanese karateka. Sometimes, following this rule means you should stop being so concerned with etiquette. Years ago, I visited a Brazilian jiu-jitsu dojo, and I was more familiar and comfortable with a stricter Japanese code of etiquette and manners. But BJJ schools are pretty chill, as the kids say. So while I was following those traditional and more formal rules, I was the only one doing so. As such, I was sticking out and looking pretentious. That was bad etiquette. Even within the iogkf-usa, the practice of etiquette can vary from school to school. Do your best to follow what is practiced at the place where you're training. As with karate itself, you learn more and more as time goes by. No one expects the beginner to get it all right. Plenty of us old-timers, not being Japanese, still get things wrong. But learn good etiquette, alongside learning the physical aspects of the art. And with time, you'll realize that having good etiquette is like having good technique. It's not about impressing others, but being of service to them. Happy training.